Hello and welcome to the WAQ Show. I'm your host, TJ. And alongside me today is...
I'm Matt. Boo, 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 boo. And I'm Dan.
And they're with me every time. Not just today. Which makes me so angry. No, not really. But that's part of our topic, which is frustration in gaming. And is it actually enjoyment or just frustrating?
Yeah. It's this is a topic idea spawned from a lot of stuff I've studied, so I am raising my hand here. Disclaimer, I am qualified to discuss this. I have done research on this and such. But yeah, as TJ said, we're going to talk about frustration in gaming and whether it's a representation of anger or a representation of enjoyment, which is really strange, I know, right out the gate. When you're frustrated, the last thing you're thinking of is, how fun is this? And I'm sure you all can relate, TJ, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you're frustrated with something, you're not sitting there thinking, "Oh, this is so fucking fun. Ooh, I'm having such a good fucking time. Yeah." You know, that's not how that works. And we all know that. But I'm here to tell you that the difference from a linguistic perspective of frustration and anger is oftentimes misunderstood. Anger is a representation of hate, essentially, of a mixture of hate and disgust, unhappiness. When something makes you angry, you want it to stop. There is a severe mental dissonance occurring. It basically just opposes you on some fundamental level when you're angry about something. Your dog pooping on the floor. You're angry because that's not where poop goes. You've told your dog 1,000,000 times not to poop there, and now you've got to go fucking clean it up. That's anger. Versus frustration is more categorized by more disappointment and understanding of a lack of self-efficacy. It's more of an internally driven concept where oftentimes you are frustrated, and that's if you're frustrated at yourself kind of thing. You can also be frustrated at others, but that's driven more by a realization of a lack of capability is where frustration primarily comes from. It shares some similarities to anger, but anger is a hard and fast disgust and vehement hate, whereas frustration is more of an unhappy realization of a limitation, I think, is the best way to characterize the difference between these two. What are your guys' thoughts on those definitions for our operative terms here?
I agree with him. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that is not how I would have defined frustration. I would have defined it much more wishy-washy. Personally, I would have defined it as anger. Anger is, man, it's really bad to use the word in the definition, but anger is anger that I want to feel, and frustration is anger that I do not want to feel.
That's an interesting approach.
Like, when I am angry at something like my dog pooping on the floor, I want to be angry at that. That is bad. I don't want it to happen again. That's just anger. But when I'm playing a video game and a part frustrates me, I don't want to be angry at my video game. I want to be happy at my fucking video game.
And that kind of that's a, like you said, a more wishy-washy way of driving home the same point, I would argue. And I like the more layman's approach to it of frustration being something you don't necessarily want to feel, but you are, because that is oftentimes driven by a realization of a limitation, like I defined. Because you don't want to be limited. You don't want whatever you're frustrated at to be limited, but it is. Whereas with the anger, I totally agree. That's like something you're buying into, and that's why it's a much more extreme version of this emotion. It's a further degree kind of thing.
That makes sense.
So I wanted to start by defining very clearly for our viewers the difference between the two, because if we're not on the same page with that, the rest of this episode is not going to make any fucking sense.
True. Also, I will be honest, and this is kind of tying into what the episode is with frustration, but I just solved one of my frustrations with my mic.
And that's awesome.
I didn't realize this, so part of the sound waves that are picking up are vibrations going through my stand that is going from my computer through my desk, and I put it on my mouse pad, and it nullified it.
Oh, that's cool.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I got semi-distracted while figuring that out.
You're good. That's a great example. And that there again, just to drive home the point, he solved a limitation that he became aware of, which frustrated him. So and now you feel proud. You feel excited that you've solved that problem. That's another key difference here, is when you solve the source of your frustration, you feel proud, you feel accomplished. When you solve the source of your anger, that's more like, well, things are back to the way they should have been in the first fucking place. You don't really have that same degree of accomplishment when you solve a source of anger. In some cases you do. Again, this isn't blanket statements that apply to everything equally. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is dependent on the individual as well. So just take these with a grain of salt. It's a science, but it's not an exact science kind of thing. It's a social science. But without further ado, I think we should probably start talking about video games in relation to this.
I just wanted to say, so you're saying that when you're angry and you manage to stop being angry, you don't get anything out of that but not being angry. But when you're frustrated and you manage to stop that, usually there is a shift where you get like some pride or some, I don't know, relief or something.
Yeah. Sense of accomplishment. Basically. And again, I'm not saying this is in every circumstance, because there's certainly been times where I was pissed the fuck off, super angry, and once whatever was causing that ends, I do feel happier, kind of thing. Like but oftentimes it's mostly like it's a relief more than a happiness or an excitement or an accomplishment. When I solve the source of anger, it's more of a relief instead of a mood boost into the positive range, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So a great example in gaming of anger would be when you're encountering a boss, for example, or working on a level, and your controls don't respond to the input that you feel you put into it. That is not a limitation of yourself. That is not a limitation of the game. That is a miscommunication somewhere along the line, and that is you saying, that's not how this is supposed to work. Now, to be fair, oftentimes, that is the perception you put in the right series of commands when you actually didn't. However, reality is often mirrored by our perceptions. So if you perceive you did the right thing and it didn't happen, and the controls are what you're blaming, and you feel that that's why that happened, that is anger. So, like, I pressed the fucking jump button in my Mega Man game, and he just ran off the side of the platform. Fuck you, game. That's not how this is supposed to work. I did the right thing, and you punished me for it. That's anger. That's not frustration. Whereas frustration would be something like a Dark Souls fight, where you feel like you did the best you could, you've rolled, you've blocked, you've parried, you've done the right combination of attacks, you waited, you were patient, and you still lost. And you can recognize that the game didn't misread anything you told it. You strictly lost because you got your ass beat. That is frustration when you start getting upset at that, when you start having anxiety in relation to that, an anxious reaction, because you're coming to the realization that you in your current state are not good enough to beat that boss. Next time you might be. And there's no, like, training montage that needs to happen to do it. You just need to perform better. And you recognize that you didn't perform well enough. And that is frustration.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just thinking about an angry thing that I could bring up that made Dan angry in a game.
Oh, no. League of Legends?
Yeah. I was going to say, like, stealing Blue Buff with Ezreal.
Motherfucker. See, that's not frustration, because it wasn't anything like, it wasn't a realization of a limitation. It was angry at a choice made by somebody else.
You should be angry at the choice made by you to play League of Legends.
No. No, we won't get into that today.
But do those examples make sense to you guys? Like, would you agree with my assessment of that?
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking like one, and I think I want to say, in my experience, anger amplifies frustration, but frustration doesn't amplify anger for me within the video game realm.
I think it has to do with being cognitively aware that it is a frustration and not an anger. If you can't separate the two, then you're almost always going to end up falling back into anger. And that's when you get issues of people like throwing controllers at screens and punching holes in walls due to video games. It's not the video game is inciting violence, it's the individual has a cognitive challenge separating the idea of anger and frustration internally. And that's when it all amounts to an explosive outburst of anger, is when you get frustration adding to anger like that.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, I'll describe some of the little bit that I have going on right now when I play Call of Duty, my go-to, I guess, for talking about FPS. At least currently. But my controller right now, I need a new controller because my right joystick I've worn out, so it sticks.
Dude.
And that is not okay when you're trying to turn on someone and they're trying to aim down sights and stuff.
I had the exact same problem with my left thumbstick.
Oh.
Like, I will be playing Monster Hunter, and my dude will just careen to the left into the laser beam, and I'm just like, motherfucker!
Can confirm.
All right, so this is how it amplifies, though. So that makes me mad, and I've honestly done the trick of putting like hand sanitizer down in, and it kind of loosens it up, and it works for a while. But campers have been abundant recently, and that is just super frustrating. And then amplified by my controller not working sometimes when I go to, like, I know where they're at, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get them this time, and then it's like, nope.
Yeah. Do you have any good examples of anger or frustration in gaming, Matt?
I honestly don't feel I very often get angry. I feel like I can usually, even if I wasn't using the exact words, I feel like I can usually tell, like, all right, this is starting to annoy me. And I will usually, I will push it. It depends. It depends on if I want to hit the wall or not. And I don't know if you know what I mean, but you know how you get to a boss fight and you'll do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you'll realize, like, if I just stop right now and come back to this another time, I will do better. I will do better with fresh everything. Fresh eyes, fresh skills, not making these silly shortcut mistakes I'm trying to make because I'm frustrated and I want to rush through it right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will realize that early, and sometimes I will realize that when I get to the wall. When I'm like, all right, well, now I am doing worse every time I attempt this. I'm not doing better anymore. I was thinking about playing Bloodborne again, but honestly, I got halfway through that game, and I don't really think I should pick it up in the middle. I should start at the beginning. And so I'm thinking a lot about, like, all those very difficult parts that I'll have to get through again, and, like,
yeah,
you know, all that shit.
Yeah. No, I could definitely see that. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've talked about this offline before. Your approach to a lot of this kind of stuff is heavily avoidance. Like, if you feel yourself getting, whether it's angry or frustrated, that's kind of your sign to put the game down, because you don't want to have that experience with a game. I believe you've said multiple times, you play games to have fun. If you're not having exactly fun or something adjacent to fun, that's your cue to stop.
It's not exactly fun, and there is a little bit more going into it, but I do believe this is this in last week's episode, or what we recorded last week, is what spawned this. We live next to each other, like literally rooms next to each other. I can hear Dan playing Monster Hunter World, screaming at, you know, whatever fucking monster he's going against.
Only sometimes.
But still, it's like, I hear him late at night when he's playing alone. Monster Hunter World is not exactly a game you should be playing alone, so it's only increasing the difficulty, but he wants to play fucking Monster Hunter World. That's what he wants to do with his evening. And so he's doing it, and I hear him over there like, "Motherfucker, what is this shit?"
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, love that. How many fucking iframes was that? How are you supposed to dodge that? I hear all this stuff and I'm like, that doesn't sound like fun. Because that's not I get loud when I'm excited. I don't get loud when I'm frustrated. I get quiet and annoyed and I have little sharp outbursts as opposed to like more yelly tirades.
Yeah, and that's some of that individual difference in player, for example. So when Matt experiences frustration, he kind of internalizes it, has momentary bursts kind of thing, and you don't like express that frustration, in a way that's visible or audible, but you're still feeling it all the same, and that creates that dissonance. Whereas me, the reason I state that I think frustration is a representation of enjoyment in a game, that's my standpoint in this discussion, if that wasn't already obvious, is when you're an individual who expresses that, there's a certain degree of catharsis when I go, okay, so basically I'm just fucked, game. Thanks, appreciate it, kind of thing. Like, that's me expressing my frustration, but internally I then stop mentally for a moment and go, well, am I actually, or is there something I can do to change this? Yeah. So in the example that was brought up from Matt of like the iframe commentary of, oh, I literally don't have the iframes to avoid this attack with a roll. Well, then I stop and say, well, what's the answer? The answer is I need to start moving out of the way earlier, which means I need to recognize context cues, or I need to change my equipment to increase the amount of iframes I have in a roll. So I know there's a solution to the problem, and I've expressed my frustration. So it's kind of an almost immediate jump back to, all right, well, let's get back into the game. I understand the problem here now. I either need to immediately counteract it, or I'm going to fail here, and then when I come back next time, I'll be more prepared. So that's like the cathartic verbalization audibly of that frustration helps me in the immediate moment of rolling back to the point of enjoyment. If I don't do that, or if I do that and I mentally recognize, again, a lot of this requires you to be a bit self-aware of your own feelings and emotions. If I make that cathartic outburst and I still don't feel like my head's in the game, if I'm still pissed off about it, 5-10 seconds later, that's when I'm like, all right, either this game is being bullshit right now and I need to recognize that, or I'm just mad at something else. And a lot of times that's when I kind of realize, and this is straying a bit from the video game topic, but a lot of times when I do that outburst and I'm still pissed off 5 to 10 seconds later, that's my cue to stop and say, am I actually mad at the game, or is something else in my life pissing me off right now? Because normally I can reset and go back to enjoying myself pretty shortly after that outburst. But again, that's going to be different on, demographics of individuals and players. But that's just a little bit of behind the scenes of one type of gamer, i.e. my type, is expressing that immediately helps me get back in the mindset of enjoying what I'm doing in the moment. And if I fail then, I've already identified the shortcoming, and I can attempt to rectify that in the next approach. And that's the fun part to me. I like finding solutions. So that's why I think frustration is a representation of enjoyment. It's a precursor to enjoyment, essentially.
I think the same. I think I'm on the same of both of you, actually. And I have both types of frustration. So I think there's two types of frustration. And the one that you're talking about, Dan, I'm definitely with, in the sense of I get enjoyment, and those are more of like solo campaign things or person versus AI type deals. Because I remember specifically one of the most frustrating things I ever encountered was in Halo Reach on Legendary, and I got stuck at a part. I mean, this is like a 5-second part. You go up a hill, and then you have to fight your way up the hill, and then you're stuck there. And I think I've talked about it before, maybe on the last episode. But anyways, and then you save some people, and then you have to fight back down the hill, turn the corner, and there's like a tank. So you can't just run by it. That part, getting back down the hill, because on Legendary all your people die like instantly.
Oof.
Took me 3 to 3.5 hours.
Oh.
5-second part. I was so frustrated, but I was like in that moment. It wasn't like a frustration of I could have told you exactly at what point every character hit what every section where every gun was at. I memorized that whole thing, so I was able to get out of it. Like I had to. I tried so many renditions of things to. So it was a fun frustration. I mean, it was very frustrating at the time, but once I conquered it, I'm like, yes, like
there's almost that frustration that arises from the monotony and repetitiveness of trying it over and over and over. I know exactly what you're talking about, but it feels so good once you get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there's that, but there's the other frustration, and this is one where I want to ask you, like, what hits your nerve the worst? Like, that makes you the most frustrated? And mine comes from competitive games, and mine comes from when people do things that are just stupid. And for example, would be like playing League of Legends and you walk through a bush. And in no way should anyone be in that area from the enemy team, and you walk right into them.
Oh yeah, and like, it's that unexpected, like what the fuck are you doing here kind of thing.
And it's not even that like I die or like they get the better of me. It's just like, no, that makes no sense. Like there's no good reason for you to have done what you did, even though it bettered me. And that frustrates me. And that happens in a lot of competitive games where it's like little stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'd still argue that falls under the classification of frustration leading to enjoyment, because in those instances where you're like, oh, fuck, what's going on here? Like, I wasn't expecting this at all. If you manage to recover from that, that feels amazing. If you get fucked by it, you're not going to make that mistake again in the next 12 games. I guarantee you.
Yeah, but then it's just like something else. Yeah, I'm with you. But it's oh man. Again, it's on a whole nother level.
Yeah, it comes from a certain. Again, I think a huge component of this distinction. And I'd love to hear, Matt, your specific opinion on this. The huge component that supports the argument of frustration leading to enjoyment or being a sign of enjoyment of a game completely depends in a major way on how self-aware you are of your emotions in the moment.
So you're saying the more
you have to be aware of what caused it and why you feel that way. If you don't, then that just leads to that anger and that sign of disenjoyment.
Yeah. No, if like, and there's so many different ways to look at it. Like, if I just run into a room full of enemies and I die, well, it's like, all right, well, that was dumb.
Dark Souls 2, great example of that. And a lot of people are like, this game is kind of shit. It's because it made people angry because it was artificial difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas your Rogue Squadron you were playing recently, just yesterday, right? Like it didn't seem like you were angry or frustrated despite having failed that mission a couple times or whatever it was. You just got right back into it and kept trying from that last checkpoint until you got it right.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Like the one example I can remember of a TJ-esque 3 hours stuck on one part is I have no fucking clue how many times I have played the opening to Bloodborne. The opening of Bloodborne up until the initial bonfire that you find. And I don't mean like an actual bonfire save point. I mean like literally a bonfire in the middle of town at the end of the first street. Like, you start the game, there are several ways that you can go, which will all lead to this one street. And at the end of that street is a bonfire that a bunch of enemies are around. I do not know how many times I played the game up to that point to get past that fire spot through a gate door into the next section. But when I finally got through to that next section, not only was I like incredibly satisfied and be like, yes, I fucking did it, woo! But I also actually felt like I knew how to play the game way better. Like, it was a good chunk of area of good chunk of progress before I actually hit another point that I I got stuck on.
Yeah, and I like the way you just described that because it brings another angle to look at this issue. And I think maybe this is a nice happy medium between the two definitions we were discussing at the start, the two versions of defining frustration, is frustration represents a challenge, whereas anger represents like being gatekept or a hard wall or something like you can't fathom how to overcome without some like serious fucking undoing or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Because what you just described was very much overcoming a challenge, which is a fundamental motivating component of gaming, among many other aspects of motivation we won't get into. And I think that's where a lot of frustration comes in. And it's really interesting how games use it differently, too. So an example in Bloodborne, every boss is a challenge, which is probably going to create frustration. And sometimes on your way between bonfires, there's significantly challenging combats kind of thing. So you kind of have this but there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, I've only played it a little bit. There's a fair amount of Bloodborne where it's like one enemy here, two enemies there, or no enemies at all, and you're just walking through the city because it gets its effect from atmosphere, and that's an important component of it. Not knocking that component of the game, but it's present. There's a decent chunk of the game where you're not being particularly challenged, correct?
It's like a breadcrumb trail of enemies in between large encounters, whether they be bosses or just a bunch of different enemies in an area where you're not going to be able to fight these one by one.
Yeah, perfect. And those represent the challenge markers on the timeline of the game. And that's really interesting, and you have that dip. To call back to an earlier episode, that's your dip and peak of engagement with a game, which also affects its motivation. Whereas you have games like Halo, for example, where it's more pockmarked by large encounters and cutscenes or travel scenes or things like that interrupt those. Is that kind of correct, TJ? I haven't played too much Halo recently.
Yeah, mostly.
Campaign specifically.
Yeah,
and then you have...
I mean, it's similar to that. You have little trails of enemies and then big pockets.
Okay. And then you have games that are essentially boss rush games, like Monster Hunter World or... not Hyper Light Drifter, Fury. Fury is a boss rush game. There's a few others like that, where it's basically big challenge, break, big challenge, break, big challenge, break. So they kind of use... It's interesting how it's a different degree of use of this mechanic of overcoming a challenge to stimulate you to continue playing. You have a lower stimulation, but it's continuous in some games, whereas other games, it goes all in on that mechanic of, we're going to frustrate you every time you do something in this game, but you're going to overcome it pretty consistently, and you're going to keep feeling good about it. Or you're going to get frustrated and come up with a solution and feel even better about it, kind of thing.
I think, too, because we were talking about how, like, you get the breaking point where you just kind of stop playing. I think for me, it's when I'm really frustrated and then I hit anger, like I hit a wall that might have something or have nothing to do with it. Like, I know I told you guys about it. I think it was off, but in Call of Duty, I was replaying the campaign, and it was a tricky level. But my first time through it, I was actually flying through really good, which this actually made me even more angry. But there was a couple little frustrating parts, and I hit one of the frustrating parts, and then it auto-saved where I died.
Oh, God, that's right.
So I had to restart the level, and at the point of restarting, I was like, nah, I'm done.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting expansion on the idea. I definitely believe too much frustration can build to the point of anger. Because at that point, you're just pissed off that that's the only thing happening is getting frustrated.
Yeah.
Like, it's happening too much. And I think that, from an observer standpoint, watching someone experience frustration, like you listening through the wall, for example, Matt, you only hear my outbursts of frustration. So you're only hearing the series of frustration, and it feels like it's just building and building and building and building. You're not hearing the in-betweens of, like, yeah, motherfucker, I just got you, bitch, kind of thing.
True.
Like, Like, you're
Yeah.
hearing the frustration that's occurring over 4 or 5 hunts, but you don't hear again, this expands to way more than just gaming, but you never hear the positive stuff. You never hear the positive news of, I beat it, or I finally got the part I needed to make the weapon. Yes! You never hear that.
I only
you
hear
only hear
the big emotions. I hear a big guffaw of laughter, or I hear a big, like, piece of shit, bullshit, out fucking landish, crap ass game. You're right, I don't hear the, come on, drop. Yeah, I got it! Fuck yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and that's really interesting that from a bystander perception view, you're getting the understanding that it's only frustration after frustration, which really reinforces the point TJ brought up of there is a certain boiling over point with frustration, which I totally agree with. And you can see it through the wall because that's the only part you're seeing, which you probably feel a little anxious when all you hear is me fucking screaming at my computer for an hour.
I'm getting used to it.
Sorry.
It's fine.
I can tell you about
yeah.
one of the most frustrating gaming experiences I ever had.
I did want to bring something up, but it is a bit of a tangent. So just remind me about first play successes after this.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay. This is a pretty quick story too. But so have you guys ever heard of Vector Man for Sega?
No.
This is when I was a team. So it's a side-scrolling shooter. It's fun. I don't really know how to describe it. You just kind of like a Mega Man kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking old school Sega days. So no save points, no nothing. But I was on fire. 3 days left it on, and I just when I went to school, paused it, played it whenever I could.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh no, this isn't bad. This isn't a freezing moment. Although that has happened to me.
I'm
that made
expecting
me
your
angry.
mom turned off your thing.
Oh no. So I've never made it to the final boss in this. And I mean, I was on fire playing it. I was doing great. I had built up, I don't know, 50. I think it was around 50 or 90 lives, somewhere in there, like killing it. Get to the final boss. I didn't damage it once with all my lives. I could not.
What?
I could not figure out how to dodge it or to hit it.
Jeez.
And that
Oh
was
my God.
that was like the epitome of one of my most frustrating. And then afterward, I was so deflated. Like I didn't play it for months, and then I couldn't even. Like I tried again because I really wanted to beat it and figure it out, and I couldn't even get anywhere near where I was to get back to the boss.
See, I would argue that goes to anger, because if you had 0 degree of success over that many attempts, like, there's no way your brain made the connection that there's something you could do better, other than the fact that games are designed to be beaten.
Yeah.
So I would argue that probably, whether you expressed it or not, or whether you felt it as it or not, somewhere in your subconscious, that probably registered as anger. Because that's tantamount to your controller not doing what you're fucking telling it to. The game is not giving you anything to be successful, is what that sounds like to me.
And part of the reason why that boss was so hard, it's like this big spider thing, and if it touches you, it's instant death.
Oh, one-shot kill. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother source of bullshit that I think feeds anger and not frustration. Just in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I had another one where I got to the final boss in Sonic 2. That was another like 3-4 dayer, and it froze.
Go fast.
It froze in the last fight.
Oh,
That was anger. Because I think the other one was more frustration for me because it was me doing things and I just knew I wasn't doing the right thing and I just couldn't figure it out. Whereas that was just game said no.
That reminds me of when I tried to do Behemoth in Monster Hunter World fairly recently, and my computer froze, so it disconnected everybody in the party into their own instances. So I was pissed off that I wouldn't get the kill because we were doing well, but I just fucked over 3 other people unintentionally from getting the kill. And it was literally just the system my computer just having a fit, and there's nothing I could have done. That was anger.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm shocked. I'm shocked you didn't come to Matt's wall like the Kool-Aid Man.
But Matt, you mentioned first place successes.
Okay, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but I very commonly do this thing where the first time I get to a place, I will be outrageously successful. I will be... I think it is because I know nothing. I am hyper vigilant, and I'm not making any assumptions, and I'm like on my best, and I'm chugging, and I'll get like, I don't know, 60% through, and then I'll die, and then I will not have another play where I get that far for a long time. I will just keep getting stuck at like 30% or something that the first time I just flew right through it. I can't get past it now.
Yeah.
I'm making all these assumptions where I'm like, what?
I've definitely had that experience. Best example I can think of right off the top of my head is not Blighttown, but in Dark Souls 1, where you go to fight.
Oh, this is absolutely a
Quelaag.
Dark Souls fucking thing.
Yeah, when you go to that section where you go to fight Quelaag, and it's the whole like going down, and the city's built on stilts. Oh, what's the name of it? It's not Blighttown.
I didn't play Dark Souls 1.
I'm gonna Google this if somebody wants to express their story.
I don't think I've really ever had that, to be honest. I kind of have, but
another.
I usually get better the more I try to play it and stuff.
Another thing.
It is Blighttown.
Unless you want to keep going.
No, I'm gonna remember this story vividly regardless.
Okay.
So you can go first.
This is a new tangent.
Oh, okay. Let me finish this one up then. Just great example of what you just discussed, Matt, was the first time I really sat down and played Dark Souls 1 was when I was getting out of the army, and my boss was basically like, hey, you don't need to show up in the office anymore or whatever, just get all your stuff done, kind of thing. And I had a day where there were no open appointments the next day, so I kind of had a dead day. So I was like, well, I'll stay up super late and play some video games, because, that's what you do. So I sat down and I started playing Dark Souls 1, and this was a couple of years after it had come out, and all of my friends really liked the game, and they all told me how god-awful Blighttown was. And it's really rough. It's basically this city built on stilts that you have to slowly go down. You can get knocked off or fall off and die a lot, and there's enemies that'll shoot these poison darts at you that basically rapidly deplete your HP unless you can cleanse it. First time I've ever gone in there, all I have about it is I know the general concept of what the place looks like, being built on stilts. There's a threat of massive poison, and I need to go down. And this place is notorious for being hard as fuck. And I just fucking wiped that shit up, no deaths, got all the way to the bottom bonfire. And I was like, man, I must be pretty good at this, or I got super lucky. Either way, I'm happy. Picked up Dark Souls 1 like 2 years later, got to the same place, could not for the life of me figure out where the fuck to go, got super pissed off. I was like, I'm done, I'm not playing this anymore, the controls are clunky, came up with some excuses or whatever. So it was the perfect example, and I think part of what causes that in a more condensed format that you're talking about, of the first time you get really far and then you just 30%, 30%, 20%, 30%, I think part of it is that hypervigilance, which is what my story was playing to. I had every reason to be super aware of everything that was going on, because that's all I had was, it's awful. And the next time I went, I'm like, oh, I did it before, it was easy, and it was hard. But I think in that more condensed format of trying and trying and trying, there's a certain degree of fatigue as well, because you're so vigilant that first run through, which takes a lot of mental energy from you. And then the next time you go through, not only are you making assumptions and actively being less vigilant, but you're also mentally more exhausted than the first time, so you're going to miss the small things you caught the first time.
Yeah.
So I think there's a twofold thing working against you in those examples. But that's all I wanted to bring up. But I love that point. That was really cool.
Also, to TJ's point, right before my tangent, I had my own moment where I don't know if you've ever played it, but on the original Game Boy, Mario and the 6 gold coins.
No.
I was like 10. I was slowly working my way through getting all the fucking gold coins, because you need all 6 gold coins to go to Bowser's Castle. I don't think I ever beat this game. But, I was working on one of the coins, and I think each of the 6 lands are like loosely based on a nursery rhyme. And in this one, it was the 3 little pigs. So like the pigs will come out with their pipes, and they'll fucking roll around, or they'll hop around, or whatever. You gotta jump on their head. I'm chugging along in the backseat of the car, doing this shit, and my dad wanted something. I don't know what it was. And he was like, Matt, do this. And I was like, I can't, I'm busy. Because I'm in the zone.
Uh-huh.
And my mom had helped me through parts of this game, so she knew how difficult it was. This was not an easy Mario game. I don't know if they are. I haven't played many since.
No, they're usually not easy when you go back to them.
But, yeah, eventually he just got fed up, reached his hand back, grabbed the Game Boy, and I died, and I think I was on, like, my last life.
Oh,
So
no.
I just started crying, and my dad was like, it's a fucking game! And my mom was like, actually, it's really fucking difficult. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but you probably just messed up a lot of work. Or something like that. And he, like, kind of brushed it off, but I think he felt a little bad. He's like, all right, well, whatever, it's
Probably.
done now. So do the thing I wanted. Which is why immediately upon you starting your like 3-day I didn't turn my system off story, I was like, oh no, Mom found your system on and turned it off because you were wasting power or something.
No.
Oof.
That your car thing though reminds me of back in the day when they when they had the things that put on the back of the seats and you could watch videos and stuff on long trips.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what I was playing. It was something on the PlayStation, but you could hook up the system too, and they made the port so you could plug it into your car, like into the carport thing. What we didn't realize until we made our first stop was when he turns the car off. Didn't save or anything, and just whoop. Yeah, no, my dad had no idea. It's like, what?
Ouch.
Yeah, that was terrible. Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I guess to a certain degree as well, that actually brings up an interesting point of, because like, crying can be a representation of sadness and also anger as well. I'm sure somewhere in little Matsby's heart, he was a little mad at his dad for doing that.
Oh yeah.
I think anger more commonly spawns from external forces, whereas frustration is more internal, i.e. the closed system of you and the game, and the others playing the game in the case of multiplayer games. I think frustration spawns typically from internal forces, whereas anger spawns from external forces such as other players' choices, in TJ's League example, or his Call of Duty example with campers, or from dad grabbing your controller, or not understanding how the car charging port works. Those probably resulted in a little bit of anger and sadness more than frustration kind of thing. So just interesting little parallel or paradigm going on there in connection to what we're talking about in the grand scheme.
I mean, given everything we've talked about, honestly, it was probably a lot of frustration built up at trying so many times at this fucking boss, immediately turning into anger that I could not let out, because my dad would just, if I just got mad at my dad for punishing me, he would just get mad at me.
Yeah. Great example of the boiling over point. Yeah, for sure. Or the kind of everything stacking up. Well, damn. That's pretty awesome. Do we have anything else we want to go over? Or I feel like we've kind of beaten this one to death here. A lot of interesting stuff.
I have a little thing
Go.
that is like, in high school, one of my greatest things that I would do for fun is I would get these little puzzle books, and they would have, you would have like these things where it's like, all right, there are 6 houses and there are 5 people that live, or there are 7 people that live in the 6 houses, and each house is a certain color, and each person has certain needs, and blah 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 blah, and you'd have to figure out who lives in what house, and it would just be like, Jeremy and Tony live in or next to the red house, and Jessica lives in the green house, and those are so incredibly frustrating because it would give you the minimum information you needed to create your own chart and start plotting out like, all right, well, if this and this and this is here, then that cancels this out. All right, so I can... It was basically like a Sudoku word puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And just frustration as enjoyment. I remember those.
Brain teasers.
That's kind of cool.
Brain teasers are like frustration, enjoyment.
I think my favorite source of frustration is a well-constructed puzzle. Because sometimes you get the puzzles in games and it's like, I'm missing something. They're not communicating something well. I don't know what they want from me. And it's like, I'm just wasting my time. I'm going to fucking Google it.
That's a great example as well. You brought up they're not communicating something well. Games that don't teach you how to play them effectively. They don't give you enough of a tutorial or an explanation of the controls. That is a frustration that quickly and easily leads to anger, in my opinion. Because there's no easy way around that other than constantly failing over and over again, and not through a limitation of yourself, but a limitation of no instructions were provided.
Yeah.
So that's actually an awesome example of like frustration into anger kind of thing.
There's also the problem when games teach you how to play them, but very poorly. Like,
and then when they flip the fucking table on you and they teach you something and then completely subvert that as well. Sorry, total
no problem.
side shoot.
I was just gonna say, like, everybody gives Aaron Hansen shit for skipping game tutorials, but he doesn't play. His shtick is he doesn't play good games, or he rarely plays good games. Like, you don't usually get the Game Grumps playing the new Assassin's Creed or whatever. You don't get them playing these AAA titles. Not to say, like, maybe you hate Assassin's Creed. Not to say that those are the benchmark for good games. But you know what I mean? He's currently playing Hollow Knight. That is an amazing game. It teaches you how to play it very well. It is very difficult and all that shit. But he's usually not playing Hollow Knights. He's usually playing fucking Sonic 2 or Sonic Adventure or some dumb shit that he's gonna get angry at.
Shadow the
Hedgehog. Some dumb shit he's gonna get angry at for your entertainment. And so he skips the tutorials because these games, bad games, don't teach you how to play them well.
So there's no point.
So you skip through the tutorial, and then when you don't know how to do something, it's like, yeah, it's your fault because you didn't read the tutorial. But when you sit down to play a game for fun and the tutorial is, here, read a book, bitch. It's not fun. That's a bad part of the game.
Looking at you, Monster Hunter.
Yeah. Lots of text to read in a game is inherently not good.
Like, honestly,
That's a great example.
I think that the people that like to play games and the people that like to read are two, for the most part, different groups of people. If there is fat chunks of reading in a game, it should not be mandatory. Like Skyrim. All the books in Skyrim are optional. And if you're going to get something from the book, it gives it to you. You open up a book, here's the Thief skill bonus. Boom, done. You don't have to read that book.
And
go ahead, TJ.
I'd say for me, I'm on the level of, I want to read all that stuff.
And you can choose to.
And what I do is I save all that stuff for like way later, like when I'm close to beating the game or something. I'm like, all right, now I want to connect all the dots that these books help me fill in information with.
And I'm half and half to wanting to read the shit in a game. I need to be invested in the game before I want to read it. I'm not going into Skyrim and reading the first book. I'm going into Skyrim and collecting every single fucking book I can because I like that shit because I'm a librarian. But am I going to read those books? I don't know. Skyrim, you need to fucking impress me and make me want to know about Tamriel's Force fucking Civil War or whatever this fucking book is called.
Especially games like that where you have to make a character. So you already sit there for like an hour making your character.
I think there's an important distinction here as well of, I totally agree with the point. And I think to add on to that, a game that is blatantly upfront about this game requires a lot of reading is the exception to that being not okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So like something like a visual novel, if you buy a visual novel, you know that's going to be almost all
novels in the
so you're going
novels in the genre.
Yeah.
If you're going into a visual novel, if you start playing Monster Prom and you're like, they're not banging, what's all this reading shit? Well, you should have read the description of the game, idiot.
Yeah, or more time appropriate Monster Prom 2 Monster Camp. A shout out to Jesse, great game. But yeah, I think that's actually a fantastic point and a great way to kind of tie things up. It's really good.
Yeah. I was going to talk about campers a little bit more, but yeah. I'd just be beating a dead bush.
Get it? Because they don't move like a dead bush.
Only of my hyper-awareness when it comes to camping.
But yeah, I mean, go for it, dude. I think we still got a little bit of time left in the episode.
So there's certain points, and it plays back to my, like, hating when people do stupid things. Or, like, things that are just kind of wrong. So there's different levels of camping. Like, sniping and camping, two very different things. If you're set up to snipe people, that's cool. Frustrating, but cool. Camping certain spots that make sense to camp in, also cool. Still frustrating, and I have to say, like, I'd be there too if I was able to set up. But camping, like, spawn points, or camping, like, areas just outside of spawn.
Yeah, when people are obviously not paying as much attention as they probably should be throughout the rest of the map, kind of thing.
Or it's not even that. This is part of the game's fault too. But you keep spawning in that same spot, or like right next to them, or right in front of, and they're set up in a way where you can't get to them directly, or in a way you have to go way out of your way to get to that point, and they still have visual of you both ways. So you're in a very hindered situation,
right?
To try to outplay that. That's what drives me crazy. And that's been like a more apparent thing right now with stuff. But yeah, no, it's just like, I hate, because there's like a level of unfairity to it. And that's what drives me. I don't like when things are unfair.
And that attributes to an external force as well as a limitation of the game. It's not giving you the tools to overcome that challenge. So that leads to anger instead of frustration, kind of thing. Another excellent example.
So yeah. Anything else you guys would like to add?
Nope.
If this is directed at our listeners. If you're having a lot of people express to you that you're like, why do you play that? Common phrase that's said is, why do you play that game if it makes you so angry? Maybe take a moment, stop and think about what we've said here. Determine if it's actually anger or if it's you verbalizing your frustration. And create, a calm, logical argument based on maybe some of the details we've shared here, and try to explain to that person that that's actually what's going on. It's not that you're angry at the game. You're not an angry person. You don't just like to scream at a computer screen. It's you expressing a frustration to get back to the point where you're enjoying the game, kind of thing. And it's you trying to parse out how to overcome a challenge instead of just being angry at a game. Because I know that was something when I was young that really pissed me off. Was I'd play games and I'd have outbursts. I was young, so I didn't understand this argument that we're making now. But my parents would always be like, I don't want you to play that game anymore. You're always so angry at it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's not that I'm angry at the game. If I was angry at the game and disliked it, I wouldn't play it. You're right. But that's not what's happening here. So maybe try to help them understand that angle if this is something that you as a gamer, and this even expands beyond gaming, but here our examples are directly connected to gaming. But if someone expresses that to you fairly often and it bothers you internally, use some of the points we've made here, see if they apply to you, and help them understand in a calm, logical way that it's not anger, it's not that you dislike what you're doing, it's that you're trying to understand and parse out how to be better and overcome a challenge. And it's just something that you're doing to express that frustration so you can get back to the point of enjoyment faster.
And if they don't understand you, just dab on them and call them boomers.
Yep, there you go.
That'll definitely fix it.
You'll always win. Mm-hmm.
And if you'd like to send us your frustrations that you have in games, we'd love to hear them.
If you're listening to this and you're not old enough to understand that that was sarcasm, well, here's your fucking hint.
But actually, to TJ's point, if you want to email, what is it, WAQ Show, WAQSHOW @gmail.com. If you've got stories to share, if you want to let us know, topics you want to hear about or how you feel about an episode you've listened to, something like that, feel free to shoot the email there. We'll do our best to read emails that come in. We might give you a shout out if we talk about your story or your example or something like that. Who knows? If we get enough feedback and emails in, maybe we could do an episode on like fan mail kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually a great point, TJ. We should definitely open that up now.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it. Thank you for listening to our episode of the WAQ Show. Hopefully it didn't frustrate or anger you. I was your host, TJ.
Matt.
And I'm Dan.
That's the WAQ Show.